This is our first time connecting in English.
It is. And I'm going to go ahead and share the live stream to different groups so that whoever wants to join us can join us through the link.
Okay.
Uh,
I actually wanted to know, Tim, why you wanted to talk about this topic. Because you initiated.
I have a lot of topics.
Why is this one special for you?
So just well, hold on a second. Let me see. Are you able to see me?
I can't see you yet.
Turn it off. Back on. Hold on.
Maybe I'll start with why I wanted to talk about this. I think as international students coming to the US, we wanted to learn, right? And it's really hard to get into a field of study where people mostly use their native language and talk. And I've really struggled because coming from a different culture and language, it just felt like I wasn't doing it right. And I needed a lot of support. But I think we are in a field where it's dominated by white people, right? And most of the psychology theories are developed by white people and men. So I bet all of us coming here to study this major has gone through quite some discrimination and racism. And then, I think becoming a professional, learning about the rules as a career person, a professional woman or professional, you see a lot of things that are unfair that's happening, whether it's in the US or all over the places at workplaces. I actually have worked with a number of people who have been bullied by their manager or coworkers, and that caused them not being able to continue to work. Their mental health was so bad they had to take a long time leave, and not really sure, and also very scared of returning to this workplace. I can't hear you. What's going on?
Well, I haven't spoken much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. No, this has been on my mind for quite a while because apparently I myself have firsthand experience, microaggression, discrimination, all kind of other stuff. Again, due to the nature of the work I do, I'm a social worker. So besides actually witnessing this in a day-to-day basis with my clients, I also have that. I wouldn't call myself as a victim to the discrimination or the racism, but more as a survivor. So I think that also contributed to part of my professional burnouts in the previous years, and that's actually almost kind of pushed me into full-time private practice because, I'm done with that system, and I wouldn't say that it's beyond repair, but it's like in order to preserve myself, I gotta leave. I actually gotta do something different. So yeah, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. And you're right. I think as international, we are dealing with a lot of nonsense in a foreign country, right? So for people who are natives and they can, if they actually experience workplace bullying or microaggression or discrimination, they can just say, F it, I'm just gonna quit. But for us, because of the visa status or really the visa restrictions, the moment we decide to quit or we need to find a different job, we also have to be really strategic here because you only one. I think if you go through the H-1B stat, what's the name of that program? So it's an employer sponsored program. Once you decide to leave the job, you have up to 60 days. If you don't find a job within the 60-day window, you must leave. Otherwise, you will have this so-called unlawful presence. So a lot of people are burning out in this process, not maybe not just because of the nature of work we do, but also really the interactions we have with people we work with. So yeah, that's kind of one of my passions. One of the things I work with my clients on a pretty frequent basis is to really address the professional burnouts, and a lot of the issues are contributed by microaggression, discrimination, and also workplace bullying. So that's just what I do.
Yeah, it's very personal, right? It's very personal. So I wanted to. It's okay if you don't want to share, but I wanted to know if you're willing to share on some level some of the experiences with discrimination and bullying and workplace violence that you have witnessed or experienced on a smaller scale, like individual level, or on a bigger scale, like.
Well, I'd be happy to share those experiences, but I think in case, since we have a larger audience, I'm not exactly sure where they stand in terms of the understanding of these basic concepts. I think it might be a good idea to just go over the basics first, just to define what workplace bullying is, what microaggression looks like, and really also discrimination, because a large part of my work is about psychoeducation, and these are things I do talk about. So, Tense, what would be your definition of workplace bullying?
Workplace bullying, a lot of the times I see harassment,
Okay.
which means when you're not in your work hour or when you are you have your own autonomy working on something independently, and you have someone, either your coworker or your boss, keep contacting you saying, can you give me this, can you give me that, or even being critical, why aren't you done, or repeatedly giving you so much feedback, right? Like you have to do things over and over because they're never done with their feedback. Or you're being contacted outside of your work hour. For example, after you finish work and you left, you still get a call from your boss or coworker saying, oh, can you help me with this? And if it happens so much, that makes you feel uncomfortable, that your personal boundary is being I guess, disrespected. I would consider that as workplace violence, harassment.
No, it also sounds like what you just described here is almost like the micromanagement, the type of managers that doesn't trust you and decide they're gonna just keep you on tabs for every single thing. So they call you, they want to know everything that you're doing, right? So it's almost like a reflection of them being doesn't really fit them, like not trusting you at all. Or maybe that's just their way of exercising the control in power.
Right, right. Because they're exercising their power, it tends to lead the supervisee or the staff feeling like I'm not doing a good job, like I'm stupid, or I can't do a good job, I'm incompetent.
So it's I think when we look at workplace bullying, it's almost like a repeated mistreatment, right, of the employee. It can be, uh, it can be, it can be conducted by the superiors or maybe even your colleagues who just, maybe there's that threats, maybe there's also the humiliation and also sabotage your work. So by crossing the boundary over and over again, you start to realize, okay, no, maybe this is actually what I deserve. I don't really have personal life. Work is everything, and I have to take it. I have to tolerate it.
Right, because
And
you're afraid
it,
of
it doesn't.
right? You're afraid of not getting the review you wanted and you lose your bonus. They have a lot of power over you. And especially if you're international staff, like we're relying on the employer for our immigration status, like sponsoring for H-1B, green card.
Yeah, they definitely have way much more power than what they should, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
then also looking at microaggression, I think this is fairly common topic. So microaggression it doesn't need to be related to work, but we encounter this every day too, right? It's the everyday verbal, nonverbal, environmental, slights, insults, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So that kind of the type of communication can be hostile and also send negative messages to the target persons based on solely maybe their marginalized group statuses or memberships. And then you also have discrimination.
Woman, you can't be a good driver, right? That's an aggression. That's discrimination. Or they can see you. Oh, you don't look white, or you're not black. It must mean you're a foreigner. They assume you're a foreigner and you can't speak English well. Or if you can't speak English well, they assume you're stupid.
Some of them can sound like compliments. Oh, you speak really good English, right? Or they can ask like where you're from, and like when people ask this, like this, I'm from China, right? But then, or sometimes like I'm from New Orleans because I spend a lot of time. I actually spent over 6 years in New Orleans. Or now I've been living in Houston. I'm like I'm from Houston whenever I travel to different places. But then they're like, where are you really from? So it sounds innocent, but this is a type of microaggression. And guess what? It's not the perpetrator who can define or really define what microaggression is. It's actually the victim. The victim reserves the right to just decide if it's microaggression or not. And
right. I feel offended. Then it is a problem.
Right. But then you're gonna oftentimes people get defensive saying, well, no, that's not all I meant. So you're overinterpreting it or you're thinking too much about it. We don't see color here. We don't do this here. That's their defense, right? And that it's almost like, I'm actually invalidating your experience. Your thoughts, your feelings don't really matter. And
right.
It doesn't really matter.
It seems like they're trying to include you by not saying, oh, you look right, you look different, or you're coming from a different culture. They will say, oh, we're all the same, we're all human.
And I think Chanra is trying to connect. You might want to approve her request.
Oh, Chanra. Okay.
Yep.
Hold on a second.
So while Canzi is doing that, let's also talk about discrimination. Discrimination. Hey, we are in the United States. This is one of the things that we see the most. Well, yeah, I think so. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it.
Oh.
It's pretty bad.
Hello.
Hey, John.
I'm sorry for being late.
No worries.
I just finished my session there.
I hope you get to enjoy the weekend without any more sessions.
Yeah, that's me, actually.
You're done
Thanks.
for the day?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So I was just hearing Tim was talking about color blindness, right?
Yep.
Was that? Yeah. So anything else that I missed?
I wonder what that looks like in England.
I personally think, right? I think at least in US, probably the kind of the intervention is more advanced than UK. I think so. I think at least from the, like, for example, the racial trauma training that I recently joined, I thought, wow, like US is really good at least the theoretical part, like, raising awareness and, preventive measures. I think is definitely more advanced than what we have here. Yeah, and I think, of course, you have variation across country as well. Even UK is a small country. Like, for example, maybe in London is more diverse, and then London NHS personnel might also be more diverse than a Scottish trust. So, like, I heard we've got a few trainees every year. So most of trainees are from Edinburgh University. And they said, but they're English, right? So they said they were quite shocked of how white the course is, how white the course is, like predominantly white, and there was almost no colored person. It was almost no other Chinese from other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think that's something to do with NHS funding, because you have to be at least permanent residents in order to qualify to apply. And Edinburgh University doesn't recruit anyone who is self-funding, but certain universities they do. But still, like, you know, you obviously have colored people who actually are British. So where are these people? Yeah. But then universities like Oxford, they try to tick boxes. So they would recruit maybe 4 or 5 colored trainees. But on
Like
paper,
the diversity quota, right?
but they're just trying to tick the boxes. But in reality, what kind of real stuff you're doing, that's another thing, I think. Yeah.
It's quite
international, or they try to include recruit, like hire international or people of color, but they don't necessarily have the resources in place to support, right?
Absolutely.
You still have to listen to like a white boss, and people won't make any accommodation for you because you come from a different background.
Yeah,
you know, it's kind of funny. It kind of reminds me of what just happened. I think I saw some post on LinkedIn the other day. February was I believe it's Black History Month, right? So even in 2024, there are companies who try to, again, meet this DEI goal, so diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. So they had the panel discussion talking about Black History Month. Guess how many people out of this panel are actually Black? 0. 12 panelists are all white. There's a gender, you see, you know, male, female, and all that, but nope, there's no Black people. And yes, they are talking about Black History Month.
Wow. That says how little how little Black staff they have at that company, right? Yeah, like I've been to so many workplaces that I was the only Asian person, or I'm the only international staff.
But then that goes back to. Sorry, Tim.
No. I just saw the post that I think Tess is trying to connect to. So.
Right. Okay. Cool. No, I think we talked about this informally previously. That psychology is such a wide middle class subject, and that has been proved to be really, really hard to get into as well. So I'm the first qualified psychologist in Scotland who's from China. So I think, like, you know, traditionally, I think even for white people, then there is that social class difference as well. So if you're from extremely poor background, how easy is that for you to carry on for so many years before you actually get accepted to the doctorate of psychology course? You know, how can you actually support yourself, like by doing waitering jobs or different things, like very low paid national minimum jobs, before you actually start earning a salary? Like, why did my training, I know vast majority of, like, I think maybe only 1 or 2 people, they were not from rich background, like background, you know, it's like relatively that they could actually pay for the tuition fee, they could actually, get support from parents. At least they don't need to pay rent. At least they don't need to, spend huge amount of money to support themselves. Yeah. Hi, Tess.
It sounds like
Hi, everybody.
Like showing up on the screen.
Mhm.
Wanted to talk. It seemed like I have a cap on only 4 people joining.
Oh,
Is there?
Yep.
really?
Yep, that's the original room setup. When you chose 4, then it's a mix of 4, and that's okay.
Oh.
It's
Someone
okay.
said about what we discussed here, performative diversity.
Yep.
I quite like this term. Yeah, is I have never heard of that, but is that a term? Performative diversity.
Mhm.
Have you look, we people from the UK haven't heard of that before. This is virtually the first time with this term, performative diversity. I like that. I like the sound of it. Yeah, I can use it next time in my team meeting.
Have you guys been on the board for these DEI stuff? Because I have.
A little
And
bit.
I kind of like, yep, it's not making any difference. And I think so. I was working in a healthcare organization, right? So it's I'm actually the first and the only international student or staff they have ever hired. So I kind of persuaded my previous supervisor to, decide to sponsor my work visa, and that was the first. So somehow with a solo status as an Asian male social worker, because again, that facility has never had a male worker. And before I started that job, the turnover rate was so high. We're talking about a max of 6 months to actually stay in that position, for that person to stay in that position, and then they are at the door.
Wow.
Yep. And also, by the way, the average turnover rate for any nursing, like skilled nursing facility staff, is about 7 months. So you're pretty much going to see a complete group of people every 7 months. That's just not like, it's quite common. So that kind of explains really how, I'm not going to use the word quick, but how fast-paced, hostile that environment can be.
Yeah. People must get burned out so fast.
Yep. And it was, so yeah, I was I also hit the history, I hit the record by the time I stayed there for over 2 years. I ended up staying there for almost 5 years, by the way. So it's, that's just, again, without the green card, it was kind of tough, but I had to power through that.
Right.
Yeah.
I have so many people, clients who work at big companies, but their culture tend to be kind of top down, or the direct supervisor or manager are toxic. But it's very hard for them to leave because they can't, as a foreigner, they can't have a gap between their 2 jobs. So it's very, very risky. They're risky, and they're afraid to report their manager or coworker as well, right? Because they're afraid they might get retaliated.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually supported. Yeah, off you go, Tessa.
Sorry. One question that I have always had before was whether sometimes it's my own personality or the way that I perceive other people making it too big of a deal for myself. Because I've seen, right now I don't want to make like any race or skin color or whatever a big deal for our conversation. Because I'm trying to give an example that is, I knew there was a white girl in her position, that how much she was advocating for her salaries, the environments of working, like getting into different confrontations with like the supervisor, not even just with me because I was her boss, but only the upper managers. And of course, she got consequences because the big boss did not like her, and I did not end up know like where she went or whether she left the company or whatever. But when I put myself in her situation, I don't know whether I can do the same thing like her.
It almost sounds like
Whether
she
you
has
right?
So talking about discrimination, so Tess, have you experienced discrimination firsthand?
Yeah. I mean, it's only once, but it's kind of it's kind of like traumatic, and even I left the place, I had dreams about like I went back and over and over again, and it does give me a lot of like insecure about where I should go, or whether I am not doing enough, or whether I'm not good enough to perform my duty. But I stopped doing that.
You quit that job?
Yeah.
Same for me. It reminded of me at my job before I started my private practice, like Tim. I was at a pretty bad work environment. You know, I wouldn't say that the director was explicitly bullying everyone, but it was just a really bad work environment. Like you don't feel happy and you don't have much autonomy in doing what you want. You don't feel heard. You don't feel supported. And I ended up going with another staff to the Title IX person, which is a office set in a university who take reports of inappropriate behaviors, right? Like discrimination, bullying. Over a few, like 6 months, every incident where I felt offended or mistreated. So this is on my own mental health, even doing that work. I think I did go through it. I chose to go through it. And I remember I went to a multicultural summit and I had an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Daryl Su. You know, like he is, you know, the Asian American psychologist who wrote about microaggression, right? He was the first person to talk about it. And I sat down and I asked him, what should I do? And I think he said something similar to get the hell out of there. It's not worth a fight.
Because again, we're looking at this is it's quite a predominant. It's quite prevalent, right? So I was kind of looking up some data, and this is actually what I want to share with not just y'all, because I think you can have a pretty good idea of what that looks like. So according to a survey by the National Center for Protection Against Discrimination in the Workplace, 60% of American workers have experienced workplace bullying or microaggressions. Women are more likely to experience workplace bullying than men, with a percentage of 65% and 55% respectively. Then there's also a survey by a workplace consulting firm called HBR Consulting. They found that 75% of employees believe they have witnessed discrimination in their workplace. Of these, racial discrimination is the most common type of discrimination reported, and followed by the gender discrimination, and then the age discrimination. Workplace bullying, microaggressions, and discrimination can have a negative impact on the employee health, right, and also job performance, which lead to burnout. As much as I want to say, we can actually seek professional help, and we can try to reduce the depressive, anxious symptoms related to work. Guess what? The cure to professional burnout is to switch gear, is to quit. Because burnout is never something caused by the individual. It's actually it's the system that's failing the individual. So I think from the lens as a social worker, like this is something Tess and I probably talked quite a bit in the past. All the systems are oppressive in nature. They are willing to sacrifice individual well-beings just to keep the system going, even though it's not optimal to the individual. But hey, from the past data, the system is functional. It's not being destroyed. They gotta be doing something right. So why would they bother to change for something unknown, something that maybe we can call it more progressive or the right thing? Why would they bother to do that if they know that they can maintain the status quo? Because that keeps the system surviving. So why bother? But I think the question I always have is like, are you willing to become the collateral damage to the system here? If you're so over-invested, then sure. But then also, now we're going to see the cultural differences here, right? I think in our culture, there's such a big emphasis on self-sacrifice. We take pride in self-sacrifice, and that just kind of go hand in hand. Like, no, we're going to sacrifice ourselves just for the greater good. And the greater good here, it means the system, means the organization who are profiting from the employees, well-being. This is me sound cynical.
And also, why rock the boat, right? Like, 枪打出头鸟, right? Like the Chinese saying, why should I be the person who is going to rock the boat? And I might get targeted or retaliated. I think that's a lens that can be, that's seen very differently from like Eastern and Western culture, because I think in Western culture, or at least from my work experience, what I have witnessed in mainstream American culture is allyship. They talk a lot about allyship. So also my previous workplace, not the same one, different one, had very toxic leadership where favoritism was played. So the boss had a favorite list and the shit list, right? So very black and white. if you're favored, you have so much power. You can design your own program, your own schedule, blah blah blah. Like you're on all kinds of projects, right? But if you're on her shit list, it looks bad, right? So there were people over the years, and also the turnover rate was so high. There were people started to build allyship. They're talking amongst each other. They're having strategy. They're strategizing how to take out this person in position of power. And I was, and at the time I was a new hire, and I was international, so I just want to, stay low, out of the radar, right? Like nobody pay attention to me. Let me just get through the day, get my job done. But I remember I've witnessed how they're doing it, right? They seem to have formed this group of allyship, and they started recruiting people. Like, are you experiencing this with this person, with our boss? If you do, like, we support you to report to somebody, right? Like the higher ups, because we have all done that. So if you add another voice, this case will be stronger. So I actually have witnessed this boss being put in kind of a remediation plan. A third party outside company was hired to kind of investigate this boss. And eventually she was asked to resign. So I guess I witnessed a successful case.
That sounds like a victory.
What Tim said there and what Canzi just said, I can just summarize a bit there. I can't remember the author's name. I think something like Dahlias or something. I'll find out and I'll share with you. But I think there was something quite striking, which stated that the change can only happen when the people who actually have the power want to change.
Mhm.
So, as Tim said, what is in their interest for them to change, right? However, when do the powerful people or the group want to change? Is there when the resistance was big enough that they felt like that had to change? So the freedom was never given as a free thing. There has to be sacrifice. So we know for U.S. history, we know the whole kind of, the Black Lives Matter. Yeah, that's after Floyd's. That's after Floyd's incident. Yeah. So every single movement or every single progress was as a result of some sort of sacrifice and some sort of efforts. So I think, we can see very clearly. Tess, did you mention the culture? For Chinese culture, Tess, you said something about that as well. Yeah, you said 枪打出头鸟 as such, right? So I think yes, for something to change systemically, and we need to be aware of how the cultural aspect or society norms influence individual behaviors and cognition. So how we actually, I think we as professionals, of course, we have the social responsibility, well, at least, people like us who have been trained overseas. So it has always been a huge emphasis on, addressing social inequality, social injustice, and of course the racial discrimination as well as other inequality or lack of social justice is something we could actually work towards. But I think, it's not just simple work. It's work at multiple levels, micro and macro levels. If we keep being silent, why would the dominant group make change? So they just suddenly become compassionate, or let's give Chinese people some rights, or let's offer them something, or let's free the black slaves. Of course, they would not give up their benefit or interest.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. In order for us to make social justice change on a higher level, we need to get on a powerful position. We need to get on the table with the people who are making decisions.
Oh, absolutely. And it's same as, how many people are actually doing psychology or psychology related jobs in more kind of like white dominant culture like UK or US. I mean, UK is worse than US, I think. It's less diverse because it's not immigrant country as such. We need to have people who actually are higher up in the system. Like if I become the director of my trust, of course, that I will be doing more things. Yeah, so someone is saying 既得利益者肯定不会主动放弃自己的利益. Of course, they wouldn't, because that's human nature. That's human nature. Because
I want to share a little funny story there, because I think when I was back in undergraduate, I majored in psychology. I actually also did a lot of volunteering work, and one of the student organizations I joined is called it's called SOAR, SOAR, Students Organizing Against Racism. So we did a lot of workshops. We partnered with, I believe it's called People's Institute. So they come in and actually do a lot of those racism awareness workshops. Very intense. We made a lot of white people uncomfortable in those workshops, and I love it to see that. And also we also saw things are happening, right? So there are times I actually went on protest, and somehow that got captured by on the newspapers from my university, and somehow that got thrown in front of my parents' face, and they freaked out and called me saying, "Tim, don't ever do this. You don't want to be involved in politics. You don't want to do any of these here, because again, 枪打出头鸟, and you better stay in the middle, safe."
Yeah.
I smiled about it, and I decided not to really discuss much of that with them, because again, when it's out of context, it's really hard for them to really comprehend what that looks like to just silent. Because when you stay silent, you become just one of the accomplices. You just become that, like we talk about the bystander effect, right? So we can actually be active bystanders.
Yeah.
Like we can actually. And if you don't speak up, that's almost like you are proving that silently, and that's kind of going to, make whoever that victim or the target person more vulnerable, and then eventually that's going to get to you.
Exactly. And I think, we know that discrimination is based on not only race, but also age, social class, religion, sexuality, gender, all these things as well. So I think,
right?
for example,
and abilities.
Yes, ability, disability, yeah. I think for me, like my disadvantage is number one, female, and another one is like racially, visibly Chinese, or non-Caucasian, white Caucasian. Sometimes, like to be fair, I have not encountered that much of kind of racism. I think because my social position protects me, because I'm also visibly middle class, and no NHS patient would actually come kind of think, I'm going to give that Dr. Zhang a hard time, because they're receiving free service from NHS. So I think, to some extent, my job protects me from being abused. However, in other situations, for example, when I'm driving back home from work, and then they see, oh, this is a Chinese woman, or Asian woman, whatever that is, then they might become very violent in like shouting at me or beeping madly, right? Because they can't see my other social marks. What they say is the visible difference there, that she's a woman and she's Asian. So that's also why racial trauma is one of the worst ones as well, because it's so evident. Other things, disability, you might not see it, or sexuality, you might not see it unless people state that, or social class. Especially social class in the UK, they are very well protected. So, for example, they forbid pupils from wearing Canada Goose or other designer stuff. People all wear uniforms just so that no one knows, and then they all eat school lunch. And whoever could not afford that, they are given free school lunch, but anonymously. It's their privacy was protected. Whereas racial trauma I think is so prevalent because it's so visible. It's so visible. But I think a lot of people still don't have that awareness, and then they think, oh, you're too sensitive. When it comes to trauma from psychological point of view, one can never be too sensitive. If you feel like there is that level of sensitivity, then we often say that there is a need for that sensitivity. Because, that's how we survive and thrive. But survival comes first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Lots of people actually left comments.
Yeah. Talking about.
Can you see that? Oh, so many people. So someone said, "Oh, I'm in the UK and I really feel for that." I'm not sure what you're referring to. You might want to elaborate a bit more, like what exactly you're talking about. But yeah. So someone also said you should speak up. But the thing is that if you don't speak up, so the reason why I definitely speak up a lot more. So number one is because we are in this profession, yeah. So as psychologists or therapists who are actually in this profession, we have the social responsibility to address anything that is seemingly injustice or inequality or things like that. Why? It's because these things cause suffering. So in order to address suffering, in order to heal people, we cannot just work on that individual level. We have to work at that multiple level, from micro level to macro level. So macro level is universe. And then it's going down to each individual country, each individual community, each individual school, each individual workplace, and addressing that culture in order to make changes, significant changes. Yeah.
It's definitely easy to say, right? And but here's the thing. I think one of the comments says, the bird who gets out, the first bird gets out actually gets killed. So again, we're not asking you to sacrifice yourself, right? I think this is actually what we're going to circle back to what Canzi said. It's about forming allyship. You want to make sure you protect yourself first. So preserve yourself. Gather all the support you can before you decide to speak up. Or let's actually be strategic here. And we can probably talk about strategy later, like on the individual level and also at a larger level. But we can definitely talk about this. So it's definitely easier said than done, but let's also be clear, right? Speaking up is an action. We human beings, we are born with prejudice. That's just how we are wired, right? So, but again, people will not be held accountable for the prejudice because at the end of the day, it's a thought, it's a feeling, they come and go. You cannot read their mind. So they will not be held accountable for prejudice. They want to be aware of that. But if let's say they are aware of their prejudice and they decide to enact on that, that's when the change happens. If it changes from prejudice to discrimination, people will be held accountable for discrimination. And then we'll talk about that.
Oh my God, I'm watching the
comments.
Like the principal, president says, "I don't think bias exists on our campus." Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's total bluntness.
Good for you.
Head to toe. Yeah.
You smile about it and you don't need to argue back, right? This is just
but that is a red flag, isn't it? That is a red flag, because that, like what Canzi earlier said about the leadership, I think leadership is very crucial to what kind of organizational culture that you're going to experience in that organization. So if the leadership openly said something like that, what do you expect? What do you expect? Because and then someone said the higher educational institutes in UK is of better quality comparing to German ones. Well, I cannot comment on that because I don't know about the German quality as such, but I do have some experience with the German. They're quite direct comparing to British people in general. like that's only my personal experience though. I haven't been to Germany myself. Someone is asking a question. Can I ask about a very specific situation? How do you deal with racism?
Well, I don't think this live stream is about racism, right? It's racism is one of the discrimination. I mean, we can definitely expand on that. So let's kind of make it bigger. It's about discrimination. So there are, I'm kind of thinking of your examples here. They're not necessarily characterized, but you have the overt discrimination. That can be, colleagues or supervisors. They make explicitly racist comments or jokes that it's not really funny to you. And you have to kind of, again, that bell rings and like something's wrong. I don't feel comfortable with this. Or it can be almost like you being passed over for promotion or any desirable assignments due to your race, ethnicity, gender, age. Or it can also be, receiving harsher criticism or discipline in comparison to other people in that, major, I'm gonna say like the majority. So that's over discrimination, right? And then you also have microaggressions. So that oftentimes I think what we face is more of assumptions of the English language proficiency or intelligence, just because we speak in a different way. Or
Jim, I'm sorry that I have to interrupt you because someone is disclosing personal information in the comments section. So I think someone is writing a few lines there. Please note that this is not a appropriate platform or place and time for more detailed kind of consultation. So this is kind of like a general chat. So we're not in the best position to consult right now, because I think by our code of conduct, we need to act professionally and need to protect your privacy. So in this case, please don't disclose much more. If you really want to, you can ask very generally, but yeah,
right. How can
please
we talk
do protect your privacy.
Strategically dealing with those situations in a general sense? Can we talk about it more generally? Like what
we can talk about generally, yeah. But I'm just warning this person so that they're protecting themselves properly. Yeah.
Definitely, because this is a public
For me, what has worked the most is to form allyship and also document. I actually was in a pretty good position because, again, from a fairly young age, I was kind of conditioned to unlearn stuff from the past and actually learn things new, right? So I have been conditioned to almost like speak up whenever I need to advocate for myself and for my clients. So yeah, there have been times like people question about my qualifications or my competency based on my age, based on my gender, based on my race. But again, that surely went away because I was able to grow through just with whatever I was able to do, right? So I was in a better position because I actually almost like rallied people around, especially my colleagues, so that they kind of know what kind of person. And for people who come in, again, it's a place with overall high turnover rate, right? So you have people coming in new, especially the managerial positions, and they don't really know my power, quote unquote, and they start to almost test that, and they quickly figure out, Tim is actually quite connected with the people in the community, and also people at the higher ups of this, let's say this organization. So you better not mess with him because I'm kind of the person that have got multiple people fired for things they shouldn't have done. Again, a lot of people put onto the position as managers, but they were never the leaders. They are the managers, right? They they never actually got a chance to learn how to be a good leader. All they know is manage, and they tend to micromanage. They can do all kinds of shitty stuff that they might not even be aware they are doing something wrong. So what I found to be most helpful is, form allyship and then document. So what that looks like is, originally when you're dealing with people who try to micromanage you, saying, you actually need to, they have this constant oversight telling you these are things you need to do, you need to document, and you need to keep me updated. So instead of allowing them to bombard me with ridiculous requests after hours, I decided, I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to document every single thing I do with you, with the residents. I'm going to keep meticulous, organized notes. I'm including any incidents that is discriminatory. So the date, the times, the exact
Absolutely.
and also actions.
Yeah.
Keep this on. Do not
put
that.
Yeah.
Like your emotions, your mood, your ability to continue to work. Some people might say, like, I feel so fluttered, flustered. I was so tense. I couldn't focus on my work for the rest of the day, or I went home and cried. Those are your evidence to show like the negative impact on you. So definitely.
Yeah, I agree with what Tim said there about making the document, because I did some legal work previously as well. Whenever you are making a diary, right? Diary, just 日记, 日记. So you're making that diary, and make sure it's not just words. It needs to be sentences. Okay, so that is the detail. So you want to make sure when you write the diary, preferably English as well, if you're in an English-speaking country, because that will make things easier when it comes to that stage. Because I have supported several people in the past, and then they won the legal battle, right? So you need to, like what Tim said, you date it, the time, and what happened. So that is recognized as legal document. And what Tanz just mentioned, that you, apart from the factual information, and then you also document how that situation affected you negatively, right? So if that day you feel happy, you don't need to say it, right? You just say, this made me feel really anxious. And behaviorally, you feel like you don't want to talk to anyone, you don't want to go out, things like that. But you need to be, factual about how you felt as well, obviously.
Right.
And it was something else I want to correct. So one person asked about her situation at work. I presume it's a her. It says like a girl or something, yeah. So is that kind of depending on whether you are the only person being mistreated? Not necessarily. So sometimes they could just target you just because you're an Asian woman, or some other kind of social characteristics that make you more vulnerable to be targeted. So does that have to be a necessary condition that everyone else has been treated unfairly? No. So sometimes it can be only you. Yeah. And I think another one I wanted to say is that quite often when Chinese people encounter workplace oppression, that could be in a form of racism, and it could be in a way of other forms.
And sometimes
people,
like normalized racism, like you're being bullied or I guess discriminated against by people of your own kind.
Yes, yeah. So it doesn't have to be racist attack only, or racist. Yeah. What I wanted to say is that quite often, for Chinese populations coping, they're very good at flying. The fight flight phrase, appease, right? Fong, right? Fight flight phrase Fong for F reaction to trauma. So quite often, Chinese population are very good at running away, avoiding that. Because again, that goes back to what Canzi just mentioned about Chinese culture. And then that, I think we also, our philosophy emphasize in harmony, right? That, you don't disturb the balance or this and that. Yeah. Then what? Yeah, someone said 明哲保身. Yeah, or 息事宁人. Look at the vocabularies we have to describe that kind of coping, right? So we need to remind ourselves, number one is that we're no longer in China. So we are in sorry, like maybe we have indeed some audience from China, but I tend to kind of work with people from overseas. So I think we need to remind ourselves that there is that level of justice or kind of procedural or systemic protection in terms of that kind of a legal side of things. So the first thing should not be that you run away from it, because
people need to see enough successful cases. Like, for example, for me, when I was a new hire, I did not want to join these people to report my boss who just hired me, as an international staff, because I was scared. I was like, what's it gonna do to me? I just want to lay low, So I was really scared until I saw them rally and really took her out. I was like, wow, let me learn how you did it.
And then I think I also see one of the comments about just escalating, right? So
escalating, absolutely.
If there are internal channels, if there, let's say this organization has an HR department or has like a clear complaint procedure, then definitely try to utilize it. You actually want to gather the data, gather evidence first, right? So you actually have almost like you can build a solid case. Then utilize those channels. This will not really be effective though if this bias, if this discrimination is widespread. And then yeah, you kind of feel I am all by myself. I don't have anyone to back me up, to support me. So that goes back to, before you do that, document and you also seek support, whether it's actually from trusted colleagues, mentors, or professional organizations who kind of specialize in this kind of advocacy work, or kind of provide that anti-discrimination support. You want to actually utilize those first, right? Actually make sure that you feel safe. You have the capacity to do so before you force yourself into doing it. Because then, if we rush to like going through the the grievance compliant procedure,
yes,
that's hectic. And if you are in this fight or flight mode, you're gonna burn yourself out further, and that's not gonna be helpful to your well-being there. So we want to get this done, but at a pace you feel comfortable with, not to rush it just because this is actually what I do now. Otherwise, I'm gonna be dead. You're not gonna be dead.
Yeah.
If you're escalating to doing like an activist work, it can cause more emotional disturbance, right? Distress, and really evaluate, how am I doing? Can I really take up that that job to do that at this time? Is my body and well-being allow me to do that now?
And also, there are, talking about specific companies that again might be Chinese owned. Maybe in those smaller organizations, maybe they are not formed in a way that's kind of in compliance most of the time. Maybe they don't even have an HR department designated to handle these kind of issues, if it happens often. So I think as we decide what kind of workplace we want to be at, we actually want to have our career at, you actually do want to look at what is the setup. So maybe we can almost like trying to mitigate the risk of workplace bullying by interviewing the employers. It's not the employers interviewing you, deciding if you're going to be a good talent or not.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the two extreme, right? talk before you sign the contract, sign the offer letter, talk to whoever that's actually working in that environment. You know, if I were working in that environment and the next social worker come in, because let's say I sign my destination, the resignation letter, and the other prospective social worker coming in, like, run the hell out of here. It's not gonna be good. It's not gonna be sustainable. So I'm gonna be given my honest opinion in that case.
So Tim, what questions would you recommend people ask during their interview or in the interview process to get a sense of what the work culture is? Not just the company, but also the team you immediately work with, right? Your immediate team.
You might not have a chance to ask questions to other team members, but I think, people who are actually interviewing you, that you have a chance to ask the questions back when you are being interviewed.
If you had time, right? I think if you had time, I don't think that should be done. Well, I'm not exactly sure if that's going to be feasible to do this official interview process. It's going to be you on the side contacting the current workers, let's say via LinkedIn or other professional networks. There are, if I remember right, I think in different industries there are different platforms. I think for tech companies, tech industry, in the US they have it's called Fishbowl. You also have some online forums that I wouldn't really recommend because it's kind of really and also a lot of comparison. I have had for people kind of almost getting anxiety just by browsing those online forums. So I'm not going to recommend that. But there are certain apps that have objective information, and you can also connect with the current workers, and just ask for some feedback. That's going to be on the site. Like, how do you feel about working at this company? What do you like the most? What do you like the least? Also look at their, the employees. Look at the leadership. How many? What kind of diversity do they have? Now I'm kind of talking about this, right? I kind of regret agreeing to serve on the board for the DEI, because then I'm looking back, like, I don't think they chose me because of my capacity, because of my knowledge or skills. They chose me because I'm an Asian male. And I just, somehow make that company look diverse.
Better. Yeah. Look better.
And that, now I'm like, probably not a good idea, but oh well, I quit already, so.
I had a mentor when I was in my postdoc fellowship. I had a mentor tell me, like, when you interview, because I was just like, interviewing like 10 places in order to get a job so I can continue it, like get a H-1B sponsorship. I was interviewing crazy, but she said, don't forget to ask the interviewer, what is your turnover rate? How many people have left in the last 5 years? Or even in the last year? Like, how would you describe work culture at your team, in the company? How would you describe your immediate supervisor's leadership or management style? So I've asked all these questions.
You did. That's quite good. Like, I can do that next time, I guess.
Hey, also, if all of these fail, right, you seek legal action. You contact organizations like, I think in the US they have this called Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, or legal aid services that specialize in workplace discrimination. If you already have built a solid case, again, talking about documents, right? Talking about evidence. These are things you can need.
And sometimes, I think in the US, you don't have to bring them to court. You can just pay a small fee to a lawyer, and they send a letter to your employer. Sometimes that itself, that's going to be enough, for them to really take it seriously. Or afraid enough not to fire you.
Someone says, someone said that, like, how their own trauma was triggered, or like, you know, these boss triggers a few of my biggest traumas. I think, yeah, as what I said earlier, certain people react to whatever the situations happening in life differently. So some people might choose to fight, right? They have the energy, they have the capacity, and then they have the confidence to do so. But some people might just want to draw the line and quit the job and then move on, which is also okay. But I think we need to really kind of prioritize our own care, like what is most helpful for us. And if you already recognize that your certain traumas kind of being triggered by, you know, whatever is happening currently, I think it might be a good indication to actually seek help and address the past traumas as well. So that might actually be quite helpful for you to deal with current or present or future challenges as well. Yeah. So it is about, you know, like Canzi, do you do EMDR as well? Yeah.
I don't
Do you
do
do
EMDR,
EMDR?
but
Oh,
I do
okay.
trauma informed treatment.
Yeah. So, you know, like in EMDR framework, and quite often we identify what we call a negative cognition. So it's something about what you believe, right? So for example, number one is safety. So if I believe that it's not safe, or something about self-defectiveness, I'm not lovable. So it is not about other people love me or not. It's about whether I believe I'm lovable or not. So what happens is that if you work on yourself and make yourself being stronger, and then quite often you will find that whatever the weather is like, whether it's stormy, it's really, really cold, but you remain solid and centered and grounded as that big tree. So yeah, you might actually shake a bit because it's stormy, but you are still deeply rooted to where you are. So that's what, you know, that's normally what we could actually offer as professionals at individual level, is to help you to address what happened in the past affects how you cope now and how you see yourself, view others, the world, and the future. Yeah.
I think what we do, I think what we're trying to do here, though, is I think to have this conversation, we're trying to raise awareness of these issues, right? Because the earlier you're aware of these signs, again, your body will be really honest with you when you notice this overwhelm, the stress, all this stuff. Like, are you willing to listen to them at an early time? And then also, as soon as you notice these signs, maybe go ahead and seek help, whether it's with your primary care physician or let's say talk to a therapist. All of these are part of the record. That's part of the document that will probably come in handy. I have had quite a few. So I just a disclaimer, right? I'm not sharing any information about my clients, but I have had clients from those major tech companies, and I actually somehow, as a therapist, like, okay, these are companies you gotta avoid by any means.
Right.
And I'm not gonna name, like, again, I don't want to get any letter from any lawyer saying like you got kind of ruin the image of this company.
No, who are you
I think it's a pretty
talking
good
about?
idea. We'll talk.
Right.
We'll talk offline. And yeah, sure. So this is like you have actually these employees coming in and they actually say, no, I'm actually dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, and most contributed by work. First, of course, it's like, no, I actually want to learn how to cope more effectively. So I'm also informed by the DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. So we talk quite a bit about mindfulness, about emotional regulation, and also interpersonal effectiveness. Right? So after a few sessions, let's say after a while, hopefully that gets you cope better. But if not, they may like, I cannot take this anymore, and then they will some of them actually will ask me to fill out the FMLA paperwork, the Family Medical Leave Act. So that actually allows you to take home medical leave because of a psychological condition that is impairing your work capacity. In that case, I'd be more than happy to actually fill this out in collaboration with another physician or another healthcare provider, because I know this client, I have enough data, clinical data, to support them in this kind of paperwork, right? So like, this is not them making things up, and they really need the help, and I have no problem doing that. But if oftentimes, because there's such a, again, I talk about stigma enough, right? Because there's still such a high level of stigma, people don't believe that mental health is real, and especially in our population, they feel ashamed of actually seeking support. By the time they cannot take it anymore, and let's say they rush to those online forums and like, oh, actually, I can do the FMLA. I can actually take medical leave, and hopefully using this time to find another job. And then you start, reaching out to therapists. I'm like, yeah, no, I cannot do that, because again, if to me that already gave me a negative connotation. Like, your paperwork counting. As much as I want to help you, I wouldn't really know if you are kind of just making things up or not. I mean, I have no doubt that you probably are suffering things, right? But your motivation to seek help is not because you want to feel better. You actually want to cope better. You're trying to actually get the paperwork done and actually get on the medical leave. And the time that should be spent is, you should spend the time to really rest, to recuperate, to actually get the energy back. But no, I am gonna work on something else, looking for a job. How is that going to be helpful to your emotional well-being? Not at all. So I'm not going to.
Yeah, that happens a lot in NHS actually. Sometimes I could actually see someone like I have that every couple of weeks at least. So they want me to write a supporting letter so they can get social housing, right? Or they want to request medical notes, not only mine, but other nurses and psychiatrists' medical notes to apply for compensation. So that's how I knew if you were assaulted in UK, even back years ago, and what you can do is that you can apply for criminal injury compensation. That could be up to millions of pounds. So that authority,
as soon as it happens, right? Like, don't wait. In terms of documentation and for your own healing and recovery too, like, don't wait till the last minute where you feel like I just can't take it. My mental health is so bad, I can't do anything. Like, the sooner you seek help, you're able to document the steps you've taken to address this issue. Your doctors and therapist note can help you,
as
can
well.
consider the documentation, and that people can see that you've made your best to help yourself.
Seek help early.
And by the time, like Tim said, you're actually taking the leave, you have the energy to do something to help yourself, either seek another job or do something. But if you're at your worst mental health status, even taking the leave, it's very hard to use it effectively, right? Because your body is done,
There's also that high sense of responsibility, right? So when we talk about boundary there, it's not about what we expect the other person not to do anything anymore. Like, your boss, your supervisor, probably gonna still send you a message as early as 8:30, and probably will not stop texting you until midnight. Let them do whatever they need to do, right? But it's absolutely within your control if you want to turn off the notification. I actually have heard people who just delete Microsoft Teams or Outlook every single day by the time they are off work. So they don't need to deal with that. I mean, of course, you can also always turn off that, you can put on the do not disturb mode. That's the time you save for yourself. Are you going to actually allow that supervisor, whoever, to take it over? Because then that's actually you giving up your power.
Yeah.
Is that really the right decision, right?
Mm.
And sometimes I tell my clients that you can also train your boss, train your boss to cope with their anxiety. Like when you notice that you've got a message from them, like don't open it. Even if you open it, don't reply. Like wait for a couple hours, even on a
Yes.
work day. You know, wait
Yes.
half an hour, wait an hour, and then reply. So they're building their anxiety tolerance. You know, then they don't expect you to reply right away. But if you're replying right away, you're feeding their anxiety. You're making that stronger, and they have, you know, their expectation for you gets higher and higher, and you'll never meet them.
Yeah, what Canzi was actually saying really is about setting up the boundaries. So when you actually respond to that email, that signal you sent to the boss was that, yeah, I can do this again and again. But when you don't, or when you start talking about, or not necessarily in a reactive manner, so you could just respond to the situation by, you know, having open conversation. Like I noticed that you have been sending me emails 11 p.m., you know, a few days at least per week or whatever the frequency was. And then you just openly talk about that and see how they respond. Because quite often human beings are very quick to respond as well. So when they think, oh, someone called me out there, and I'm just going to stop this behavior, right? So I think normally people are educated, they know, and then there are also legal kind of terms to protect workers in general as well. I mean, at least in UK that is the case, and then we've also got trade unions, and we've got very systematic kind of what do you call it? Systematic kind of at least
look at all the strikes that he's pulling off.
I know. You tell me about it. It's not functioning anymore. I mean, NHS normally doesn't have strike actions, things like that. But I think people are very desperate.
And also, I think that talking about anxiety, right? So, are you when we talk about the anxiety, is that really your boss's anxiety? It's actually your anxiety. So how are you really talking about that to you? Because really, if oftentimes one thing when I work at my previous job, I was almost literally like the information hub. Like it was all people coming to me for different information. I mean, I was good at what I did, right? So, but then like at one point, like it's actually a bit above my pay grade. Either they need to give me a raise, or I'm gonna designate this. I'm gonna push this back to them. And because you actually have your supervisors who might not even supervising you directly, and they're like, Tim's gonna get this taken care of. I'm like, well, no, actually, I don't really have time for that right now. I'd be happy to take a look at it next week. It's gonna be on my time frame. When I practice assertiveness, it made me uncomfortable, but I know it was the right thing to do. And yeah, sure, I will get the comment. I will get the comment later, like, Tim, you were kind of snappy earlier today. Like, well, I think I earned the right to be snappy because that was just not fair. So, and also, by the way, like the previous working environment I worked at, like it was a cubicle, right? So often I'm so used to being super nice and professional on the phone, talking to the insurance case managers, the nurses, physicians. A lot of them don't make any sense, and I'll still be professional and courteous with them, right? The moment I hang up, I start cursing, and so all my nursing colleagues working in the same office area, they kind of know, yeah, you don't want to mess with Tim because he's gonna call you out and he's gonna be snappy and raise hell if he needs to. He doesn't usually do that, but by the time he does it, that means you better be careful. So it's okay not to be liked by everyone. Like you're not there to make friends with these colleagues. Like they're colleagues. Once you quit the job, you might never ever see them again. So why would you treat the job as if it's the only thing that matters in your life?
Yeah. You only treat people nicely when they show respect. So if they start exhibiting signs of abuse, right? Like what kind of boss would actually break all the boundaries and send you tasks, this and that, and ask you to do volunteer jobs? And that is very obvious and, you know, red flag of abuse or bullying, or even worse, right? So I think that is often indication that you don't at least encourage that anymore. You start kind of defending yourself by doing different things and setting boundaries up.
About setting boundary, I think a lot of people have so much fear. I see in the messages board, some people mention like financial concerns, and we also mention like our immigration status, my fear of being fired. I think addressing those fear, knowing like fear is something, it can be real, it's a feeling. Fear is a feeling, which means it's something you feel, but you have to check, is it really gonna happen, or how likely is it gonna happen? If I speak up, if I try to set boundary, am I really gonna get, how likely am I going to get fired or lose this job?
We catastrophize things way too often.
Right. And I think the fear is the roadblocker for people to say what they really need and what they really mean, right? I need more time with this project, or I cannot respond to your text messages after an hour, or I've done enough edits or drafts, like I this is too much. They're afraid to give those feedback because of their fear of, like you said, negative consequences.
I saw one of the comments that as social workers, we're trained to be nice. I mean, we are nice people, right? I think as psychologists, a lot of professionals, I think a lot of people are nice in nature. So we are allowed to be nice and assertive at the same time. So don't make it sound like, I have to be nice. So that means I cannot talk back. I cannot defend myself. I have to tolerate whatever people throw at me. That's not nice at all, especially to yourself.
You need to examine your own blockage. So what stops you from, if you already noticed that you're already suffering that much, what stops you from doing something to change the situation? And what Tim said about taking that responsibility to alleviate that suffering, because whoever is bullying is not in their interest to change again. That goes back to what we said there, because they are the ones who are actually benefiting from that, such a dynamic of relationship. So it was not a huge urgency for them to change whatsoever. But if you're suffering from the pain from whatever that is causing you, that is indication that you examine yourself, you ask yourself the question, what stops me from doing something to change my situation, whatever that means to you. So again, your coping could be different. You could actually, if financially okay. I remember, was that Lucy Liu, the celebrity in America, the Chinese American celebrity? And when she was interviewed, I remember she said something about this F money she made. She saved. So that, do you remember that one? Do you know that one? So basically, it was F as the swearing word. Okay. So she said, I actually saved quite a lot of money so that whenever, like maybe it could be a film director and then they wanted to do some sideline things. And then she said, I had this F money available there so that I can just quit my job. Like I don't need to serve you there. So I think, everyone is in different situation, and if you are in a position to fight, by all means go for it, right? If you've got the legal means, you've got the financial means, and if quitting the job is the best, and that's also okay. You do whatever that suits you in that given moment.
Mhm. And in the US, I'm not sure in the UK. In the US, if you're unemployed, you can claim unemployment money from the government.
Yeah,
If
in
you
UK it's the same. Yeah, universal credits is called, but that is different if people have not had the settled status yet, I think. So that's a bit different, because if you're on working visa, then that is different.
I also remember right now we're talking about the FMLA with the employment. In a lot of companies, you will not be eligible for the FMLA unless you work there for over a year. So that might become another barrier there, right? So,
Yeah.
I think someone's asking for some examples of gaslighting and bullying in the work environment. So, anyone want to share some examples?
make you feel bad about yourself, make you feel like I'm not a good worker, a good employee, like I'm bad at doing something, I'm not good enough for this place, I always make mistakes, it just make you judge yourself really badly and feel ashamed of yourself. For me, that would be a cue.
I can think of a few. Just throw that there because that might sound familiar to some of you. One is, it's kind of denying the conversation or events. Maybe that particular supervisor or that colleague will insist a meeting or conversation actually never have happened, even though it actually did. So this actually will lead us to believe that we start to question our own memory or sanity. Like, did I actually make this wrong? Did I actually remember this wrong? Right. So again, documentation, right? So if you document, on this day at this time, this conversation happened, you wouldn't read out. So denying conversational events. Then you also discrediting the work or efforts. You will sometimes deal with colleagues or maybe the supervisors who will take credits away from you. They're gonna say they're the one that actually have done that when they are talking to their supervisor, and they undermine your work contributions in front of others. And like Canzi said, right, they suggesting that you are always mistaken or have never contributed anything to a team, anything valuable to a team. And then we start to doubt our confidence. Like, maybe I'm not worthy, right? Going back to what Johnny said, the schema, the core beliefs, like I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough,
I'm not lovable. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Like I don't deserve to be here, right?
Or sometimes it's my
Another,
fault, right?
Right.
Another one.
Yeah,
So
they
Jeremy
make you
said,
feel like
right,
it's your fault.
right. It's kind of shifting the blame. So when you notice this manager constantly blame the employees, suggesting their perception of the situation is wrong, and they are being overly sensitive, that's shifting the blame. Again, that feeling, it's just like oftentimes I tell my clients, also people who have just started out themselves, like there's no such thing as overthinking or being too sensitive.
Exactly. Yeah. The sensitivity
We're
part.
seeing this because we are using some sort of neuronormative or whatever lens looking at this thing, and that's only gonna bring you more self-judgment. It doesn't really help. So why would you want to subscribe to that value still? That just doesn't make any sense to you. What else?
Yeah.
Something else.
I'd like to share a little trick here. Yeah.
Okay,
So sometimes when someone, because of course, I think as supervisors or the leaders, managers, it's also their job to kind of manage you in a way. So how do you kind of differentiate so when is enough? When enough is enough? Okay. So I normally, like, that's why I actually if sometimes my clients are very puzzled and quite often they're students, and then they haven't had a lot of life experience, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure. It's like, is that me or is that them? And quite often I give you this number 3 rule. In Chinese, 事不过三. Okay. So if it happened once, okay, we give a bit benefit of doubt. But you need to make a note in your head, this happened. And remember that. Be sensitive. Be alerted. And then the second time it happens again, I was like, oh, 似曾相识啊, that happened before. And then I make a note again, right? And then it happens the third time, and that's when you really need to think about how you put that into action, what you need to do. So this is, this is a little trick there. But it's not to say that I'm telling you this and then you will definitely be able to do it, because changes do not happen that easily. And then you need to think about why I've got the resistance, why I've got the blockage, why I know very clearly that I'm being bullied, but then I feel powerless. Was that because I have been bullied consistently in my life? Then I have got this negative cognition that I cannot manage, I cannot stand up for myself, right? So it's something, again, happened in the past. What we quite often say, historical traumas affected your current coping, affected how you actually cope in your life in this present moment. So I think, yeah, like it's not easy. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, regardless who is in it. I think if Canzi shared the bad experience and team shared the experience. And do I have any personal experience to share? I think I have been fairly lucky with my supervisors. But if it's exactly the same supervisor, and if it's other trainees, would they actually do? Would they actually exhibit the same kind of behaviors, or would they actually cope in the same way? Not necessarily. So it's that kind of individual, and then how you actually respond to the situation, give them information of how they treat you. So again, how can you be that solid tree? Yeah, so you're deeply rooted in the ground. So whether it's storming outside, or even it's what is that called? 龙卷风, tornado? Yeah, even it's tornado, but then you're so solid, so solidly centered and grounded, and then nothing can shake you anymore. Okay, so this is what we are trying to achieve. So that's what you have control of as well.
That's definitely one of the approach, right? Is to almost ground yourself, so you know that you're not going to be swept away by the storm, by the tornado. Another approach, again, at the end of the day, it's about perception. Are you really object? Are you this thing in the middle of the storm, or are you actually willing to allow yourself to almost shift all the way up, looking at the storm from the sky? I don't need to. I'm acknowledging this, but I'm not going to engage with this nonsense.
Yes.
When I was back in the doctor program, that's actually when the office drama went all the way up. I'm just gonna keep my hands down. Yeah, I'm noticing all the drama going on, but I'm not gonna engage, because right now this is that was my perfect hideout spot. I was good at what I do. I have no problem dealing with clients. I've gained some experience, and I'm not. I chose not to engage with office drama, but also have the confidence. If I want to play that game with you, you will not stand a chance. So. So again, over the years, I kind of pretty much took over the social media presence for my organization, and I actually helped the organization, the entire company, win there's actually a reward by, it's called, let me see, I think it's called Public Information Education by Texas Healthcare Association. So that was pretty much my work. So there are times I'm like, if you can actually do this, guess what? I will talk to this owner who also has a social background, and I have no problem throwing you on the bus if I have to. I don't do that often, but I will hold you accountable if you actually get in my way. So go back to, we talk about we talk about gaslighting, right? And then also the bullying in the workplace. Bullying is actually quite obvious here, right? You're dealing with, let's say, public humiliation. The manager or the criticized employee partially in front of other colleagues, undermining their confidence and professional standing. Micromanagement is another way of bullying.
Yes.
Beyond the normal supervision, you are asked to excessively monitor every aspect of your own work, and they're going to question everything you do, your decision. You don't have any action you take, you actually almost have to explain. You have to prove that you're doing something right. They assume that you don't know what's happening and you need that constant supervision, almost treating you as an incompetent person. And over time, when we're exposing this, we start to believe that. Like, I do need that constant supervision, and I cannot survive without that person. Again, that sounds some toxic intimate relationships. I'm not going to expand there,
Absolutely.
but there are some parallels there, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, I have flashbacks already. Like, when I was in the doctoral program, I had a very inexperienced student supervisor who is in the same year as I am, having less clinical experience. Just because she's in a different program, she got placed or she got on an internship before I did. So she became my immediate supervisor. And she was like, why aren't you crying when I gave you these like really harsh feedback? And I was just like, I started questioning myself, like, am I not vulnerable enough? Because we all know being vulnerable and open is an important work for us to be counselors. And I seriously started questioning, like, what's wrong with myself? And I had a peer who really validated me so well that I just felt relieved in that moment. She said, of course you're not gonna cry in front of her. Like, she is your enemy, right? Like, you don't feel safe with her. She is misjudging you, ignoring your cultural background, or like using your language difference as your disadvantage. Of course you're not going to trust her. Why would you cry in front of her? Right? And then I was like, yeah.
that probably
cry in front of, and that's her problem, not mine.
But from professional point of view, it sounded like she felt powerless in that dynamic when she was offering feedback. She was expecting some sort of reaction from you, but you didn't give that to her, and that triggered her. She actually lost it, right? She lost it by asking you such an ethical and professional question. I think if it was in another line of work, like, not that it's allowed, but then it's more understandable that, oh yeah, like, you're not in this profession. But I think in our profession, having sensitivity is the least you could expect, and that is an obvious mistake. But why did she make that mistake? It's because her own fear of incompetency, her own fear of not doing something right. And then she was shocked. It's like, oh, why are you not crying? But in fact, her incompetency was fully reflected in the work she was doing with you, and that you did not trust her, and therefore you could not feel safe enough to express your emotions. It was as simple as that, and obviously she sensed it, and then she was gaslighting you. So that is gaslighting, and then that's a very good example.
But unfortunately, because I was a trainee, the system did not work for me, so I was the one that eventually got punished. for not
So-
taking feedback well.
Right.
Oh, that
You
is
can
so
have-
annoying.
It's you can actually get a lot of, you know, inaccurate feedback about you, but then it's like, is this really a reflection of you, or it's just a reflection of your perception of you, and do you really care that much about that person, right? So I think in the comments people are saying, you know, this is about kind of ignoring that. I wouldn't necessarily call that ignoring. I think this is about you having intentional response rather than allowing the automatic reaction to occur.
Yes.
And just
Yeah.
like
So when
right.
you ignore, sorry, Canzi, sorry.
I want to piggyback on what you said. You know,
Mhm.
having somebody like you or a professional or a friend who is able to help you see the situation objectively, knowing like
Yes.
who is responsible for what.
Yes. Yeah.
So that you know, knowing
Yeah.
that I don't have to take this feedback as who I am, even though I can't change the fact that I was the one that got punished. I can't change it, but I know what's mine and what's hers.
It sounds really harsh there.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
really harsh.
Yeah,
But for whoever is watching and listening to us there, be warned, this profession is not easy because, you know, for people who actually just joined later, we spoke about kind of psychology field itself is a white middle class subject, and in order to kind of how do we say that? 千军万马过独木桥啊. So we are actually choosing the path less traveled by, generally speaking. So, you know, like my doctorate process was not straightforward either. I think it's a lot of pain and suffering and different things. But after you complete the journey, yeah, there was definitely the silver lining of it, or post-traumatic growth after the training itself. It's a very good process of personal growth. Only you have survived of it. Yeah, I feel for you, Canzi.
Right.
I do.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a pretty traumatic period of training.
I think I'm also reading the comments here, right? I think this is more of in an environment that you don't feel safe. You don't need to express your emotions. But again, let's also be clear, right? Your emotions deserve to be expressed in a safe environment, whether it's about you seeking support with colleagues, with your mentors, with your loved ones, with a therapist, the professionals. You still want to almost like making space for that. Saying, I'm not afraid of emotion. I'm gonna try to figure out what are the needs behind the emotions, and I'm gonna actually be informed of that. They do not dictate what I do. They have good intention. They're trying to help, right? So, English as a second language can also be a good advantage to us, right? So that whatever intense language they use, it doesn't register that with us. I remember, so the direct cause of me quitting my previous job, this is my self-disclosure, hopefully it's not that too much. It was almost like it was a month before my graduation, and toward the end of the day, my administrator pulled me into his office and showed me a slip of paper. There was a derogatory language pointing towards me. Because what happened was, apparently I kind of helped the facility, helped the organization, want some additional rewards. So I was over the newsletter, and those stuff were posted on it was actually in the employee break room. Some employees decide, I don't know if they have the gut to actually write down some derogatory language that serves my face, and then use the arrow, use that word. I'm not going to say what the word is. And my administrator talked to me, say, hey, Tim, this is what happened. What do you want to do with it? I'm like, when I look at this, the first response I had was, it's kind of ridiculous. That was 2022 or 2021. And I could not believe that people still use that language, right? But like, that kind of explained, okay, wow, that was actually, there were a lot of differences even among the colleagues in terms of educational level. So it's not a reflection of me, that was a reflection of them. But what broke my heart afterwards, I mentioned that to my administrator, like, it doesn't really bother me. Right now I want to focus on getting my degree and all that stuff, right? So my administrator did not bother to escalate it to the HR. I think that was supposed to be done because it was clearly a discrimination. Instead, what was more ridiculous, they actually asked me to present to the entire company about this topic, saying, we need some education, and Tim, you seem to be best equipped to present this topic. Can you do that? I didn't think much. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not, right? This is something I'm passionate about. It's all about social justice. Without recognizing in that situation, even though I didn't see myself as a victim, I was the involved party, right? So what would have been more appropriate is for them to have an outside consultant come in and provide that education, provide that training, or having the HR take over from there. They got me involved, and somehow I gotta present that, right? It's and then that was super emotional for me when I present that information, because like, oh shit, I'm noticing this emotion that didn't really show up right in that moment. That was also during the time I was kind of working on my dissertation, so maybe I was kind of stressed out, and my window of tolerance actually shrunk quite a bit. So now my emotion came up, and I still remember me couldn't stop shaking after giving that presentation. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with this organization, and just go after yourself. And I quit. So that was. Oh, actually, no, I didn't quit right afterwards. I kind of again waited until I got my degree, had my backup plan, getting my caseload up for my part-time practice, and then also I was kind of courteous. I gave them a 30-day notice, and I even set up the entire system. Hey, if another social worker coming in, they already have something to work from, and they already have the templates, all the procedures. I pretty much wrote the whole handbook for them, for that department, because again, I was kind of the head of that department. And after I quit that job, I've been monitored again. Private practice is such a privilege, right? Because you actually have a lot of free time. I've been looking at the Indeed posting. Over 2 years, they could not fill that position. And they also get a bunch of, talking about punitive measures, right? Because again, healthcare organizations, especially that type of healthcare organizations I work for, they had really harsh regulations, and they got a bunch of fines. And now that entire organization is going down. I'm like, good luck. So that's kind of my mandate there. I didn't need to do anything about it. By just extracting myself out of it, that was probably the best thing I did for myself.
Well done.
Sorry to hear that, Tim. That was awful.
I can see that now you're talking about it like that, but I think when you were in it, when you were in that situation, you had to face it.
And not only you had to swallow, right? You had to swallow that feeling of being mistreated. You had to take on this work too.
Yeah.
It was hey, but again, you're talking about someone who actually has been established in an organization and actually really not needing to deal with those nonsense, because I'm the one that will call out stuff. So that doesn't make me immune to workplace bullying or workplace discrimination.
Absolutely.
We are all prone to that. So this is more of, okay, what are the strategies we can take to protect ourselves and actually also active advocate for our rights?
Yeah, exactly. And someone mentioned about EMDR. Can I say something about EMDR? Although this is not really directly
Go for
linked
it.
to our.
Hey, we're talking about trauma, right? This can be traumatic, sure.
Right. So, remember I saw a comment earlier about EMDR is hard, and someone else is saying EMDR is hard. It's not that EMDR is hard. It's trauma work itself is hard. It's the trauma-caused reaction, trauma-caused negative impact you're experiencing is hard. Okay, so the therapy itself is not causing much more than what you already experienced. So you might feel a bit worse before you get better, but that's not EMDR. So I often use the metaphor of seeing the dentist, right? So when you have a very, very painful tooth, and then you're very clear that the pain was not caused by the dentist, but you're fearful of seeing the dentist, right? So far we haven't seen anyone like, oh yeah, I'm going to see the dentist tomorrow. And, no one gets like static about seeing a dentist. So it's the same thing, right? Especially at the initial stage, people don't go like, oh yeah, I'm so looking forward to seeing my therapist. I'm going to do EMDR tomorrow. I'm just going to do my trauma work tomorrow. So it's not EMDR per se. It's the trauma and the trauma's effects. Okay, so this is number one about EMDR. Number two, I think in US, EMDR is also treated as the evidence-based intervention. Am I right, Tim? For PTSD, right? So in UK, they've got NICE guidelines, and that's a national level of guidelines. For Scottish, we've got SIGN, they've got Matrix. So that is officially recommended trauma therapy in addition to trauma-focused CBT. So at this very moment, in terms of treating PTSD, the only two evidence-based therapy are available and also being recommended are trauma-focused CBT or EMDR. So a lot of times then you might take it, so there's no right or wrong in this, and sometimes people say, oh, no, I'm too fearful of addressing that, and then we've got the avoidance. And you might actually talk about like, that kind of counseling type of a therapy. So you talk about things over and over again. Then I often call this 祥林早式的心理治疗. So in terms of evidence, in terms of what we already know, is that 祥林早type of therapy is not really that effective, because whenever you're repeating the trauma incident, it's just like what you're telling your friends. So you're re-traumatizing yourself again and again by repeating that with your therapist. However, the evidence-based therapy for trauma is that we are addressing the trauma by using like proper intervention. So it's not the mere repetition of the story of what happened, but it is to make sense of what happened. And then you gain a clear understanding, just like how you piece together the pixel, the what's it called? The puzzles. So you see a clear picture, and then you make some of the unconscious process conscious. So for example, if a car accident in the past makes you feel fearful of driving, and then we need to really tease out what the negative cognition you have now. Okay, it's not safe. And then we work on that negative cognition, and by changing that negative cognition of it's not safe to it is safe. And then only by changing the cognition at the neurological level, you would be able to actually change your behavior by driving again, right? So this is, in a nutshell, how the trauma therapy works.
All right, I think Canzi might need to get offline because she has another session coming up.
Right. Maybe in the future we can focus more on trauma work.
Yeah, we
right?
can.
Have a different session that focus on trauma work because it's a big topic.
Yeah.
Did you say Canzi needs to leave? Or
Yeah,
Tess?
well, because it's her live stream, so by the time she leaves, I think we're gonna. Unless you want to talk separately, we have another live stream right after this. I'm fine with that because I don't really have anything else to do. It's up to you.
So sorry, I have to leave. I have a few people to see in the afternoon, and I want to prepare for that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciated seeing all the messages and see you all supporting each other in the
That's
chat
very
box.
sweet.
And thank you both for coming. I've learned so much from you two.
We'll keep talking later.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's if we want to. Let's message each other first, and then if we want to keep discussion, we can.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
I'm gonna get.
Right.
Take
Have a
care. Bye.
Right. Have a good session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.